Welcome to the Writer Reads Luck Among Servants, Part 2. The spur line moved into the shelter of the tree line several times over the course of the afternoon, and I began to wonder how it could tell what was above. I didn't know enough of them to know if they were hunted from the sky, but it would explain the creature's caution. Whatever it was, we were overlooking Cascadia by dusk, in spite of the delays. We'd travelled most of the way parallel to the road, guided partly by the sound of travellers or glimpses of the pathway through the trees, and partly by the shadows flying overhead. I figured they knew our destination and would be travelling toward it, at least for some of the way. They were both a comfort and a worry. We came upon the town from a different direction to the road, and I was alerted to the ambush that waited there as I gazed back along the way we should have come. It made me wonder who had known we were on our way, and what I had that could be of such value. Leading the spur line into a copse of trees below a ridge leading down from the forest, I pulled the bag from beneath my tunic and stood by the spur line's head. "What do you think?" I asked it. "Do we take a look and see what all the fuss is about? See if we can get a clue as to what to do next?" The spur line looked into my face and then down at the bag in my hand. It stretched out its nose to sniff the fabric, nudging it gently as it snuffed and snuffled its way from the drawstring to the hemline. Once there, it snuffled its way back up again, pausing here and there to draw deeper breaths. About halfway to the top, it drew back its head and sneezed, then reached forward again. I watched as its top lip curled, heard the series of low churring clicks that signaled anger, and then it snatched the bag from my fingers and, with a toss of its head, flung it down the hill. "Hey!" I cried, running after it, but the spur line seized my collar as I passed, pulling me off my feet with the strength of its grip. "But we're almost there!" I shouted, sitting up from where I'd landed. "We have to take it to the maple." Seeing me about to get to my feet, the spur line planted a foot on my chest, pinning me to the ground. It raised its head and made a strange barking call again. I wondered why, but didn't wait. The creature wasn't hurting me, so I tried pushing its foot off my chest. It didn't budge. I tried peeling its claws back one at a time so I could wriggle free, only to hear the strange growling chirr it had made before as it swung its muzzle around. I saw its nostrils flare as our noses touched, and it placed a second foot on me. This one covered my belly, with the claws curling around my waist and thighs. It growled again and looked away. Gazing up at it, it took me several heartbeats to realize the spur line was staring in the direction in which it had thrown the bag, and then it looked to the sky. I tensed, but it tightened its claws and brought more weight to bear. Then it raised its head to the sky and barked again. I recognized that bark. That bark meant it was calling something or someone. Seeing the way it was gazing at the sky, I wondered why it had suddenly decided to call in the flyers it had been dodging all day. "Let me go," I said, slapping at its claws, but it ignored me. "You treacherous beast! Let me go!" I tried to wrench myself clear, but it had too strong a grip on me. A shape swooped overhead, and I realized that I'd been seen from the ambush by the road. This time the spur line didn't try to hide. It followed the form as it descended, moving its head to trace its path. All the while, its hold on me stayed firm. I tried rolling, but this only made it close its grip, and I felt a claw slide into my flesh as it growled. A shadow passed over us as I froze. "Please let me go." I could hear tears in my voice, terror and pain, all things we were instructed must never be shown in the presence of these reptiles. "Please." I tried pushing at the claw that held me tightest, but this only earned me another growl, and one of the talons on its other foot bit into my thigh. I stared up at it and bit my lip, watching as the spur line settled onto its haunches and raised its head. It barked again, and the shadow came into land, a winged cat carrying someone on its back. I had not known that great cats could fly. I looked from the spur line to the cat to the rider that dismounted, and I could not move. My mount held me too tightly for that. I felt my breathing turn to short gasps of fear as I flexed against the spur line's claws and tried to contain my terror. Cats! Of course cats would hunt the spur line. Of course they'd be as big again, And of course there would be those who rode them. Now, why hadn't I thought of that? I didn't know what to do or say. I'd never heard the like. I had only watched the cats hunting skinks in the master's garden. Trapped beneath the spurline's claws, I knew just how the skink might feel. I watched the rider come, saw him stop 5 paces from the spurline and stretch out his hand. "What have you there?" the man asked in gentle tones. "Turned on your rider, did you? Summoned me from the sky after hiding her all day? What would make you do a thing like that, hey?" The spurline ducked its head, resting its muzzle briefly in the rider's hand, and then it turned its head and gestured with its jaws in the direction of the bag. The rider glanced down at me and then to where the spurline indicated. "I'll come back," he said, and I didn't know whether to be grateful or even more afraid than I already was. The spurline watched him go, its neck ridges moving gently up and down. It turned its head to track his movements as I listened to him walk a few paces and then stop. There was a brief pause, and then the spurline made the same soft clicking it had used to warn me of the flyers. "It's dangerous?" the man asked, and the spurline clicked again. "How dangerous?" This time the spurline's warning bark turned into a shout. "No! Don't touch it!" I felt the claws vanish, but not before one final squeeze that made me cry out in pain. I felt blood spread down my side and burn through my leg. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. Not that I could move. I was watching as the spurline vanished, the bulk of its form dissolving into men, or rather into reptiles that walked upright, one of whom turned to look down at me. "Foolish child," it said, and placed a clawed foot on my chest. Foolish child, I thought. I wasn't the one who'd been ridden all day. I watched as the lizard man who'd appeared in place of the spurline's head walked away. "Jothra," it said, and I knew the rider paused. "You're sure?" "The smell is quite distinctive, my lord, especially to a spurline." "And the courier?" "No more than a pawn. She was to meet you at the Maple, or to be found and brought to you." The rider gave a short bark of laughter that held no mirth. "The old unwitting assassin trick, eh?" I listened, but did not want to believe. An unwitting assassin? Me? The master wouldn't. "Take a look. Tell me if you recognize her as one of Jovan's folk." The rider came back into view, walking side by side with my spurline lizard man. I stared up at them both, wishing they were not so blurred. "No," the rider said after bending close to study my face. "I have not seen her before. Is she new?" "Not for him. We think he traffics with the Rodanian." I could not help it. I remembered the Rodanian, had been incredibly grateful to be taken from their claws, incredibly relieved to be free of them. And then I'd felt lucky it was the master who had bought me and not one of the green men from the plains or the albinos from beneath the ground. I'd felt lucky to have such a kind master. I felt a single tear escape my eye and trickle down the side of my face. The rider's lips tightened and he straightened up. "He traffics with the Rodanian. It is enough." "But, my lord, we have no proof." "He tried to assassinate me. Isn't that cause enough?" I tried to follow them with my gaze, but my eyelids were growing heavy, so I let them close. In truth, I could not stop it happening. When I opened them again, I was in a bed, sandwiched between clean sheets and weighted down by blankets. Bandages wrapped my waist and leg, but I could move, which I discovered when a familiar growling chirr greeted me as I opened my eyes. I was out of the bed and on the floor in a tangle of sheets and blankets, scrambling backward until I fetched up against a warm, scaly hide. A second chirr greeted me, and I felt teeth close over my hair and the nightshirt I didn't remember putting on. It lifted me off the floor and I flailed, trying to break free, but my arms connected with nothing and one leg sang with pain, so I stopped. Looking around, I saw I was in a long room, set up with several beds like the one I'd been sleeping in. Beside each was something like a furry spurline, not as big and not with saddles, but sitting taller than the bed. I wondered what they were and saw movement at one end of the room. So you are awake. That voice was familiar and causing me trouble already. I wanted to deny causing trouble, but my voice failed me. One of the first things the Rodanians taught their slaves was not to speak, and I couldn't bring myself to do so now. I opened my mouth and closed it several times, but decided silence was safer and took refuge in staring at the floor. Eye contact was something else the Rodanians discouraged. Drop it, the voice commanded, and the creature holding me lowered me to the ground. I backed up until I felt warmth and fur at my back. The beast did not move, and I felt a weight settle on top of my head. Presumably, the monster had rested its chin on me. The thought was strangely comforting. I stared at the floor until the speaker stood in front of me and curled a finger under my chin, lifting gently until I had to look him in the face. It was, I thought, the same rider from when the spur line had turned against me. Remember me? He asked, and I nodded, trying very hard not to meet his eyes. He held out a hand, and when I did not take it, reached out to take one of mine. Come with me, he said, and led me from the room, slowing when I stumbled. I saw his lips tighten, and I flinched. They compressed even further, but he did not raise a hand in punishment. I am sorry you were hurt, he said. I did not realize. I shrugged. What was it to him if I were hurt? Slaves were hurt all the time. When he saw I wasn't going to say anything more, he took me to another room, one in which there was a table flanked by two chairs. Sit, he said, and I obeyed. I nearly stood up and ran for the door when he set my diary before me.